The thing about humans is that they find loopholes in everything. And I mean everything. I learned this the hard way when Commander Vekris stood in the center of our judicial arena, all four of his arms crossed, in what we Kothani consider the ultimate gesture of finality, and declared that the trial by combat between Lieutenant Garrett Mills and War Captain Thren would proceed under the oldest laws of our people. No plasma weapons. No energy shields. No kinetic accelerators. No projectile firearms of any kind, nothing, just two beings, their bodies, and whatever they could fashion from the natural materials provided in the combat sphere. Thren clicked his mandibles together in satisfaction. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his exoskeleton gleaming under the arena lights like polished obsidian. 4 arms, each capable of crushing a steel beam. Natural armor plating that had deflected actual bullets during the border wars. This was going to be a massacre, and everyone in the observation deck knew it. Everyone except Mills. The human stood there in his standard issue jumpsuit, hands in his pockets, looking about as concerned as someone waiting for a delayed transport. He was average height for his species. Maybe 5'10". Brown hair that needed cutting. A face that wouldn't stand out in any crowd. The kind of person you'd walk past without a second glance, which made what happened next so much more ridiculous. The accused may select one item from their person to bring into the sphere, Vekris announced, his translator implant rendering his words in flat, emotionless Galactic standard. One item only. No modifications will be permitted once the sphere is sealed. Thren removed his ceremonial blade from his harness. It was a beautiful weapon, forged from the fang of a Kraltesh megabeast, curved and serrated along one edge. Perfectly legal under the ancient codes, because it was a natural material, harvested and shaped by traditional methods. Everyone turned to Mills. The human reached into his back pocket, and pulled out a small rectangle of blue plastic. I blinked all 3 of my eyes in sequence, certain I was experiencing a visual malfunction. Is that, I said slowly, leaning toward my colleague Prax, a credit card? It appears to be, Prax confirmed, his whiskers twitching in confusion. Mills held up the card, examining it in the light. It was slightly bent, probably from being sat on too many times. The magnetic strip was worn. The holographic security image was faded. It was, by all accounts, a piece of garbage that most beings would have recycled months ago. Vekris stared at the human for a long moment. Lieutenant Mills. You are permitted one item. Choose wisely. This is your life at stake. Yep, Mills said, still looking at the card. This'll do. Thren's mandibles spread wide in what I'd learned to recognize as Kothani laughter. It sounded like rocks grinding together in a tumbler. The human mocks us, Thren boomed. He brings garbage to a death match. Perhaps he wishes to purchase his way out of the arena. A few scattered laughs rippled through the observation deck. Even I had to admit it was absurd. Mills was accused of sabotaging a military operation that had cost 17 Kothani lives. If proven guilty, his entire species application for Alliance membership would be rejected. The stakes couldn't be higher, and he'd brought a maxed-out credit card to a knife fight, except, as I was about to learn, humans don't really think in straight lines like the rest of us. Combatants, enter the sphere, Vekris commanded. The transparent barrier shimmered into existence, a perfect dome 40 meters in diameter. Inside, the floor was bare metal, slightly textured for grip. No weapons. No tools. No furniture. Just empty space and whatever the combatants brought with them. Mills walked in first, still holding his credit card. He moved to one corner and sat down, cross-legged, placing the card on the floor in front of him. Thren entered like a conquering warlord, blade held high. The crowd cheered. This was going to be over in seconds. The timer began. 60 seconds before combat could commence. It was traditional, meant to allow both parties time for final prayers or meditation. Thren used the time to perform an elaborate series of threatening gestures and battle roars. Mills used the time to rub his credit card against the textured metal floor. Back and forth. Back and forth. The sound was barely audible over Thren's posturing, just a soft whisper of plastic on metal. What is he doing? Prax asked. I had no idea. 30 seconds left. Mills kept grinding the card against the floor, focusing on one edge. I zoomed in my viewing display and felt my stomach drop. He was sharpening it. The idiot was actually sharpening a piece of plastic into an edge. That won't work, Prax scoffed. Plastic is too soft. It can't hold an edge against Kothani armor. But Mills kept working, his movements quick and practiced. He'd flip the card, grind a few strokes, check the edge with his thumb, then continue. Like he'd done this 1,000 times before. 10 seconds, Mills stood up, holding his makeshift weapon. From where I sat, I could see he'd managed to create something resembling a thin, flat blade. The edge caught the light differently now, reformed by friction into something sharper than it had any right to be. Still, it was plastic. Against an 8-foot-tall armored warrior with a mega beast fang and 4 arms. The timer hit 0. Thren charged immediately, closing the distance with terrifying speed. His blade came down in a vertical slash that would have split Mills from crown to crotch. Mills wasn't there. The human had moved, not backward, but to the side, letting Thren's momentum carry him past. As the Korthani turned, Mills darted in, and I saw the credit card flash once in the light. Thren roared. Not in pain, but in rage. A thin line had appeared on his forearm, just above the wrist joint where the armor plates separated. Blood the color of old copper welled up from the cut. The observation deck went silent. Did that human just draw first blood with a credit card? Someone whispered behind me. Mills was already moving again, staying light on his feet, keeping distance between himself and Thren's longer reach. The Korthani warrior's eyes had gone dark with fury. He began a more calculated assault, using all four arms in a pattern that should have been impossible to defend against, but Mills wasn't trying to defend. He was dodging, ducking, weaving around strikes with minimal movement. Every time Thren overextended, Mills would slip in and that plastic blade would find a gap in the armor. Behind the knee. Under the arm. Along the neck ridge, none of the cuts were deep. They couldn't be, not with a sharpened credit card. But they were adding up, and more importantly, they were enraging Thren beyond tactical thinking. His making him bleed, I realized out loud. Not trying to win. Just making him bleed from 1,000 cuts. But why? Prax asked. That will take forever. He'll tire long before Thren does. Would he though? I watched Mills move, really watched him this time. His breathing was controlled. His movements were efficient. He wasn't wasting energy on anything that didn't get him in position for another strike. Meanwhile, Thren was thrashing like a caught animal, burning through his energy reserves at an alarming rate. 15 minutes in, the Korthani warrior was visibly slowing. The cuts numbered in the dozens now, none serious individually, but collectively they were causing blood loss, and more dangerously, psychological damage. Thren had never been hurt like this. His armor had always protected him. The idea that a human with a piece of plastic could make him bleed was breaking something fundamental in his warrior's pride. 20 minutes in, Mills landed a cut across Thren's primary eye ridge. The Korthani stumbled back, blinking blood from his vision. That's when the human spoke for the first time since entering the sphere. You know what's funny about credit cards? Mills said conversationally, still moving, still cutting. They're designed to be durable. To survive in wallets and machines and all kinds of abuse. The plastic they use, it's got this polymer structure that makes it surprisingly strong when you shape it right. Won't hold an edge like metal, sure. But against soft tissue at joint gaps. Works just fine. Another cut, this time along Thren's lower right arm. And the best part. Mills continued, and I could hear the smile in his voice even though I couldn't see his face clearly through the sphere's distortion. I didn't modify it. You watched me make this weapon. I followed every rule. Used only natural materials provided in the arena. The floor, the card I was carrying. All legal. Thren lunged again, but his movements were sloppy now. Mills practically danced around him. That's the thing about humans, Mills said, and now he was definitely smiling. We don't just follow rules. We understand them. Find the spaces between the words. The gaps in the logic. You banned weapons. Fine. I made one. From garbage. The credit card flashed again, and this time it caught Thren across the back of his primary left knee. The Korthani's leg buckled. He went down to one knee, breathing hard, blood dripping from dozens of wounds. Mills stepped back, waiting. Yield, the human said quietly. The observation deck held its collective breath. Thren looked up at Mills, at this unremarkable human, who had just dismantled him with a piece of plastic, and for the first time in my 15 years of knowing the war captain, I saw something other than arrogance in his expression. I saw respect. I yield, Thren said. The sphere dissolved. The medical team swarmed Thren immediately, but the Korthani waved them off with two of his forearms, insisting on walking out of the arena under his own power. Pride, I suppose. Even in defeat, some things mattered. Mills stood there for a moment, still holding his makeshift weapon, looking at it with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then he tossed it aside and walked toward the exit like he'd just finished a particularly boring staff meeting. Commander Vekris intercepted him before he could leave the arena floor. Lieutenant Mills, the commander said, and his tone carried something I'd rarely heard from him. Curiosity. That was the most unusual combat I have witnessed in 300 years of service. Where did you learn such tactics? Mills shrugged. Prison shanks, mostly. Well, not personally. But Earth has a long history of people making weapons out of whatever they can get their hands on. Toothbrushes, combs, playing cards, pieces of soap wrapped in socks. When you tell humans they can't have weapons, we just get creative about what counts as a weapon. Your species has a history of imprisonment. Vekris asked. Among other things, Mills replied dryly. We're working on it. I found myself following them as they left the arena, curiosity overwhelming my usual sense of propriety. Prax trailed behind me, equally intrigued. The charges against you are dismissed, Vekris announced formally. You have proven your honor through combat. The sabotage investigation will be reopened with fresh eyes. Appreciate it, Mills said. But I could have just shown you the maintenance logs. The explosion was caused by a faulty pressure valve that was 3 months overdue for replacement. I filed 5 reports about it. Nobody wanted to listen to the human. Vekris stopped walking. You had evidence of your innocence. Mountains of it. Then why accept trial by combat? You could have died in there. Mills turned to face the commander directly, and I saw something in the human's eyes that made my scales prickle. Not anger exactly. Something colder. More calculating. Because now every species in the Alliance knows that humans don't back down from a challenge, Mills said quietly. And more importantly, they know we'll find a way to win even when you stack the deck against us. You banned weapons. Cool. We'll make them. You create impossible odds. We'll find the loophole. That's worth more than any evidence file. You used this as a demonstration, Vekris said slowly. Political theater. I used this as a teaching moment, Mills corrected. Your people need to understand what they're getting if they accept humanity into the Alliance. We're not the strongest species. Not the fastest. Not the smartest. But we're absolutely the most stubborn, and we'll turn anything into a weapon if we need to. A credit card today. What about tomorrow? The implications hung in the air like smoke. Prax leaned toward me and whispered, is he threatening the commander? No, I whispered back. His advertising. And sure enough, over the next few hours, the recording of the duel spread through the Alliance networks like a virus. I watched it happen in real time from my office terminal. Commentary. Analysis. Slow motion breakdowns of Mills's technique. Arguments about the legality of improvised weapons under ancient combat codes, but mostly, I saw fear, not the kind of fear you feel when facing a superior military force. The kind of fear you feel when you realize the opponent across from you thinks differently than you do. That they'll find angles you never considered. That your advantages might become disadvantages in their hands. 3 days later, I was summoned to an emergency council session. The chamber was packed with representatives from all the major Alliance species. Korthani, Vrel, Tarquin, Nexari. Everyone who mattered, and sitting in the observer section, looking perfectly calm, was Lieutenant Garrett Mills. High Chancellor Morvex called the session to order with her traditional 3 hammer strikes. She was Vrel, which meant she stood about 4 feet tall, but had a voice that could shatter glass when she wanted it to. We are here to discuss the human application for Alliance membership, she announced. Specifically, whether recent events have changed our assessment of their candidacy. Thren stood to speak. His wounds had been treated, though I noticed he still moved carefully, favoring his left side where the deepest cuts had been. I speak in favor of acceptance, he said, and the chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Morvex hammered for silence. Explain your position, War Captain. I fought the human, Thren said simply. I had every advantage. Size, strength, armor, a proper weapon. And he defeated me with garbage. With creativity and determination, and a willingness to see possibilities where others see limitations. He paused. That is exactly the kind of ally I want watching my flank in battle. A Nexari delegate rose, her scales shimmering with agitation. But this is precisely why we should reject them. They are dangerous. Unpredictable. They ignore conventions and find loopholes in everything. How can we trust beings who weaponize credit cards? How can we afford not to, countered a Tarquin representative. If they can do this to one of our finest warriors with a piece of plastic, imagine what they could do as enemies instead of allies. The debate raged for hours. I listened to argument after argument, watching Mills's expression remain neutral throughout. He didn't defend his species. Didn't make promises or appeals. Just sat there, present but silent. Finally, Morvex called for order one last time. Lieutenant Mills, she said. You have sat through these proceedings without comment. Do you have anything to say on behalf of humanity's application? Mills stood slowly, taking his time walking to the speaking platform. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried perfectly in the acoustic chamber. I could tell you that we'd follow all your rules, he said. That we'd be model citizens of the Alliance. That you have nothing to fear from us. He paused, looking around at the assembled representatives. But that would be a lie, and you all know it by now. Humans are chaotic. We break things, including rules we think are stupid. We find the edge cases and the loopholes and the gaps in logic. We turn credit cards into knives and probably a dozen other things you haven't thought of yet. More murmuring. Mills waited for it to die down. But here's what else we do, he continued. We innovate. We adapt. We solve problems that seem impossible, because we don't accept that anything is truly impossible. You've been fighting the Krexer border conflicts for 20 years with no resolution, right? Stalemate warfare across 3 sectors. Several delegates nodded. Give us 6 months as Alliance members and access to your tactical databases, Mills said. I guarantee we'll find an angle you haven't considered. A loophole in their strategy. A way to turn their advantages into disadvantages. Because that's what we do. And if you fail? Morvex asked. Mills smiled. Then you'll have wasted 6 months on a species that lost a war to birds. Excuse me. Morvex said. The Emu War. Australia, 1932. Humans versus large flightless birds. The birds won. We deployed machine guns and military personnel, and the birds still won. It's a whole thing. Look it up. Despite the tension, I heard several species making sounds that approximated laughter. My point, Mills continued, is that we're not perfect. We lose sometimes. We make mistakes. We do stupid things like fight wars against birds. But we learn from it, and we keep trying, and eventually we figure out how to win. Even if it means sharpening credit cards. He let that sink in for a moment. So vote however you want, Mills finished. Accept us or reject us. But know this. We're not going away. Humanity is heading for the stars whether you include us or not. The only question is whether you want us inside your alliance, working with you, or outside it, competing with you. Your choice. He sat down, the chamber was silent for a long moment, then Thren stood again. I call for an immediate vote. The voting took less than 10 minutes. When it was done, Morvex announced the results with what I could have sworn was amusement in her voice. The Alliance Council has voted to accept humanity's application. Welcome, Lieutenant Mills. Welcome to the Alliance. Mills nodded once, accepting the decision with the same calm he'd shown throughout. As the council chamber emptied, I approached him, finally giving in to the curiosity that had been eating at me for days. Did you really go into that duel planning to win with a credit card? I asked. Or were you just incredibly lucky? Mills looked at me, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker across his face. Something calculating and sharp. My credit card was expired, he said casually. But I knew the arena floor was textured, non-slip composite material. Perfect for grinding an edge. I also knew Korthani armor is segmented at the joints for mobility. And I knew that Thren had never fought an opponent who would target those gaps, because Honorable Korthani combat focuses on direct strikes against armor. He smiled. So to answer your question, no. I wasn't lucky. I was prepared. You planned this entire thing, I breathed. The duel. The demonstration. Everything. Not everything, Mills admitted. I didn't plan on getting framed for sabotage. That was genuinely unfortunate. But once it happened. He shrugged. Yeah. I saw the opportunity and I took it. Turned a legal problem into a political advantage. That's terrifying, I said honestly. That's humanity, Mills replied cheerfully. Get used to it. We're going to be around for a while. He walked away, leaving me standing there in the empty council chamber, trying to process what had just happened. Prax appeared beside me, looking equally shell-shocked. We just admitted a species that weaponizes garbage and plans political strategies around legal proceedings, he said. Yes, I agreed. This is either the best decision the Alliance has ever made, Prax continued, or it's going to end in absolute disaster. I watched Mills disappear down the corridor, probably heading back to his quarters to rest or file more maintenance reports, or whatever mundane thing he did when he wasn't dismantling warriors with credit cards. Honestly, I said. Probably both. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I made a note to never, ever underestimate what a human could do with something as simple as a piece of plastic. Because if they could turn a credit card into a victory, what else were they capable of? I had a feeling we were all about to find out.